We're going to start off with Ederson. He is out for the remainder of the season, which is 2 more games with the final Premier League game coming up that can wrap up the Premier League and an FA Cup final. These are 2, huge games for Manchester City. 2 must-win games for Manchester City. They've lost the Champions League this year. They got eliminated by Real Madrid in the penalty shootout. So this is these 2 games are their season essentially. They need to win both. They don't need to win the FA Cup. I think it'll just add on to the season that they had. But getting into the Premier League and another FA Cup will continue to add to Guardiola's legacy in English football for these players. This is a big 2 games coming up, a big 2-game stretch for Manchester City, but that's obvious, and they've been in these games a lot. They've been in these sort of situations a lot. So I'm not gonna add the pressure upon them. They know the expectations, they live the expectations, they succeed with the expectations. That is Manchester City. For you to have this amount of trophies, you have to be able to withstand the pressure. And Manchester City, they can definitely handle this kind of pressure. Now, as far as the situation goes for Ederson, there was a nasty injury that he suffered in that Tottenham City game, an important game for City. Essentially, Ederson came in. Christian Romero came in and he caught him in a nasty way, got him right on the eye socket. At first we thought, looking at it when I watched it live, I thought maybe it could have been a very dangerous, just of the way he got caught. Ended up thankfully being kind of his hip that caught him rather than his knee or leg, which could have been a lot more traumatic. But it was his hip that got him and fractured his eye socket. It actually broke his right eye socket. We thought, he thought he was going to be able to continue. The physios noticed something a little bit off from him, so they signaled to Pep Guardiola, please take him off. Pep Guardiola immediately, no hesitation, told Ortega to warm up. Get ready, you're going to go in. And as you came out, we saw a frustrated Ederson, whether it was frustration with the manager for making that decision, wanting to play in a penultimate game, which you can understand, or it's the fact that maybe he knew this injury wasn't something little, because if you see him on the sideline, it's pure frustration, pure devastation. Maybe in that moment he knows, this is something that may take me out longer than just the remaining of this game. Especially knowing in the back of his mind he only has 2 games left in this season. Now, whether or not he'll be fit and firing for Brazil at this Copa America, that'll be a whole different question. And if you remember, I don't know if Durviel Jr. is going to do something similar, but whenever it was at the last Copa America, Chichi let Ederson play basically the entire tournament. In the group stages, it was, Alisson got a game, Weverton got a game, Ederson got a game, But in the knockout stages, it was Ederson that played the entire tournament all the way up to the final. So is that going to happen again in this, in this next Copa America? The chances of that happening are slighter, just because of the fact that, Ederson, Durviel Jr., he's coming in, he's trying to make a difference. Brazil, they can't play around this Copa America. They need to revamp the sort of negative energy that's been surrounding Brazil throughout the World Cup qualifiers. And maybe he's thinking about the Copa America. That's another opportunity for him to play for his country, one of the few opportunities, just because of how good Alisson is. Maybe that was the reason for his frustration. But when you look at it but when you look at the injury that happened, was it a dirty play by Christian Romero? Now, Christian Romero, he's always been somebody who plays on the edge, on the edge, a very scrappy player. Maybe dirty is a little too far to go, but it's someone that was really, especially when you consider the modern day player. The modern day players, there's not many like Christian Romero, but when you consider the modern day players, he's somebody that's not afraid to put a leg in. He's willing to put a foot in, and he's willing to play in between the lines of whether it is unnecessary or not. Now, would I call it dirty? No, I wouldn't say it's necessarily dirty, but I definitely think that it was unnecessary and avoidable. You can see by the time Christian Romero does have a little bit of enough time by the time Ederson gets on the head of the ball to back off just a little bit. Obviously, the momentum is taking him, but it's definitely not a dirty play. But let's go back to City here. Now, it's very, I wouldn't say big injury for City, but this is something that people definitely need to think about entering these final two games. Because Ortega, he's coming number one. He's had a very, very good season. He's a brilliant stopper. Guardiola said after that game, he's one of the best one-on-one goalkeepers I've ever seen. That's a heavy statement to come from a manager that's managed the likes of Victor Valdez, Manuel Neuer. It goes on and on. I mean, Pep Guardiola has managed some brilliant goalkeeper. And what he said about Ortega really shows the caliber of player that Stefan Ortega is. And this also shows the importance of having a good backup goalkeeper. Because you need someone that can come in and make a difference for you in these must-win games. And if they didn't have a solid one, like if you're going back to a few years ago where they had Zach Steffen as their number 2 goalkeeper, if I was a Manchester City fan, I'd be very, very concerned entering these last 2 games. But with a guy like Ortega, I don't think the concern is as big. I mean, he came in the Tottenham game, and he essentially saves the Premier League for Manchester City with the 2 saves that he made. One on Dejan Kulusevski, just making himself as big as possible. And then the other one is a one-on-one chance going up against Son. And people don't talk about this, but the composure he had from goalkeeper at that goalkeeper position. Nobody talks about composure from a goalkeeper position, but the composure he had in that situation one-on-one, to be patient, to not fall for anything. There's a lot of keepers that could just come out like a headless chicken and easily get rounded. We've seen Son do that to many goalkeepers, many goalkeepers. And to have the courage and the conviction to say, to eye Son, to read his body movements, read his hips, and make that save, for me, phenomenal save. And he's just been a very good goalkeeper just in general throughout the season. So I don't think the injury is that big when you look at it from a Manchester City perspective. Now, obviously, the pressure is on Stefan Ortega. You're playing for an FA Cup title. You're playing for the Premier League. Not saying there was no pressure in coming off the bench against Tottenham, but that's a little bit different. You in a split-second moment, you're getting on the pitch. You don't really have time for all the pressure to set in. Everything thereon is just based on adrenaline. Pep Guardiola tells you to warm up. Okay, I gotta go. The goalkeeper's injured. I gotta go. Now it's different. He has a few days, or he has a whole week essentially. Not a few days, like 4 or 5 days, and then another whole week to the FA Cup final. He has some days to think about it. Like, oh my goodness, wow. I cannot cost my team the Premier League, man. I cannot cost my team the Premier League. I cannot lose this for us. We're almost here. And keep in mind, I mean, they still need to win this final game against West Ham. It is a West Ham team that's not the best of form. Not the best West Ham team. And with the David Moyes playing his last game, and you are at home, but a draw is not enough. They have to come out and win this game. because Arsenal is only 2 points behind them. So if they only get 1 point and Arsenal win, no matter by how many goals Arsenal win, they'll have the goal differential tiebreaker over them. That will send Arsenal as Premier League champions. So City are coming in here in a must-win situation with a second goalkeeper. And will that pressure get to Ortega? That remains to be seen.